So this module is a big one. When it comes down to it, the main thing you do in an IDE is work with code. That's kind of the whole point of an IDE. Rider provides a lot of very powerful functionality to help with this, from helping you quickly navigate your code base to helping you with hints and suggestions about your code. Also, it can do a lot of code modifications for you to save you typing them manually. You may have guessed by now that I'm a huge fan of keyboard shortcuts. The extra productivity you get from learning them is huge. A lot of the things I'm going to show you in this module can be done by clicking with the mouse, i.e. icons in the left-hand gutter of the editor window, but I'd strongly recommend spending time to learn the keyboard shortcuts. And in the videos in this module, I'm going to be covering a lot of keyboard shortcuts. I'd highly recommend following along yourself and trying the hotkeys, but also taking notes. The act of taking notes helps you remember them. But as I mentioned in the last section, whilst you're doing your day-to-day coding, just take a couple of shortcuts at a time from your notes and use them as part of your daily coding. Once you feel comfortable with those, then add a couple more. So build up over time. Unless you have a far better memory than I do, it's probably counterproductive trying to learn too many at the same time. But saying that, I'm going to go with the fire hose approach in this module and show you a lot. You can obviously rewatch the videos in this module as you start to add more and more shortcuts to your muscle memory. Still follow along with the shortcuts I'm going to show you now though, just to give you a broad idea of what you can do. I've created a super minimal .NET solution that you can download to follow along with, and I'll introduce you to this in the next video. In this video, we're going to focus on functionality that can help you navigate your code. So this is the Playground.NET application that I mentioned in the overview in the last video. You can download the zip of this to follow along. I wanted to keep it super simple, so I wouldn't normally structure a project like this, but I've literally got a couple of handlers, an interface, and a couple of implementations, and then the entry point. So this is just a console application, and the entry point news up the handler and runs execute on it. That handler news up an implementation of something else and calls a method on it. That implementation has an interface, and that interface just has a property and a method. And there are two implementations of this interface. There's my implementation, which we've just seen, which has got a public method which calls a private method. It's also got that property implementation, and there's another implementation of the same interface. So super simple. I just wanted the bare minimum just so I could show you how to navigate around. So let's start off with how do we switch files. Control Tab is quite a common one. Lots of different applications do it, so you can switch between the tabs that you've got open. And it remembers it in the most recent order, so I can Control Tab backwards and forwards. You may have also noticed when I did that Control Tab that we've actually got all of these down the side. So you can use these shortcuts by the number, or you can just use the cursor key to go down. So I could go to like commit, and that opens up the commit window, which we'll talk about later on in the course. Another thing you can do with that Control Tab is, say I've got lots of tabs open, these are my open tabs, I can press the delete key if I want to close them. So I've got lots of tabs open, which I quite often have. This is a very quick way to zoom through and just close tabs that I don't want anymore. Another very similar shortcut is Control, and again, mark command, not control, but Control comma. And that looks very similar. It just shows recent files you visited, not just tabs you've got open. And you can filter by show edited as well. So now let's have a look at navigating code like methods, classes, and that kind of thing. Now there's a shortcut that I was very tempted to include in the big three in the last section, and that's navigate to. So that's Alt and backtick. And again, this is context aware. So depending on where you are, you will see different options here. The reason I didn't include it in my big three is because I very rarely use this because I've learnt these shortcuts. So this is really useful for discoverability. If you're just learning shortcuts and I want to know how do I go to the implementation, I can do Alt backtick, and then I can see that the declaration is F12, so I can F12 to go to that method. There's other things like show usages and various other options. So for discoverability, this is a really good hotkey. And as we can see, we can use like F12 to go to the declaration. So let's do that. And that's gone to the declaration. So I can do the same here and go to this declaration, and the same here to go to that declaration. And if I go to the interface, F12 again, so I can step through. Here, if I click on here and do Alt and backtick, we can say go to implementation. And because there's two implementations of this interface, it'll give you a choice. Another option, instead of doing F12 to go to implementation, is if your hand is on the mouse, because I do use both. I know I'm a big fan of keyboard shortcuts, but I do use the mouse as well. then you can control click to go to a method. So if we go to the very start program, if I hover the mouse over here, there's no change. But if I press the control key or command key and hover the mouse, you can see it goes underlined and it highlights it slightly. If I click, then that takes me to that. So that's a nice way of stepping through. So you can see I'm jumping through the call stack. This is also context aware, so it's not just going to the declaration. So if I control click on my public method, it's actually choosing a usage. If I go to my interface and click here, again, it's finding the usage. And the same if I go here. Now with this one, this is a property and we can see it shows the usages. Let's make that a little bit bigger. So it's also showing read and write instances. So we can toggle here whether it's showing just the read, just the write, or both. Now this is probably a bad example because these instances are doing both read and write because it's got to read it to increment it. But if I go back to this again, then hide the read, you can see that it is modifying it. Here you can choose the scope. So you can choose the scope of what you're searching for usages. You can also open it in the find window, which will appear at the bottom. So that's down here. You could also click on this icon, which shows a diagram of usages. So there's lots of tools to help you see where your code's being used. But going back to here, I was showing the control click, which again goes to definition, or it can find usages depending on what you're clicking on. If you want to explicitly find usages, again, as we've discovered from Alt and Backtick, in my case, it's Shift F12. So if I click on here and do Shift F12, then we get this pop-up. So it doesn't do the pop-up, it just takes it straight down here. And along the side, we've got the same kind of filter options. You may have noticed that we've also got these hyperlinks above like methods and classes and things. This is called Code Vision, and there's various different metrics along. So I can see my name here. That's because this is in Git. And by clicking on it, it's shown the annotations. So you can like do a Git blame here, and we'll talk more about Git later on in the course. So let's right click here and close. If we do more, then configure, then this is going to show a bunch of options and metrics we can see, and you can customize where that appears, or you can just turn it off if you really don't like this. So in this case, it's saying 2 implementations. If I go to that and go to one of the implementations, here I've got 2 usages. So I can then go to one of the usages, and we've seen this pop up already. And depending on what we're looking at, there'll be other metrics there too. If we close this window down, the next thing I want to show, if we go to my implementation, which has got a couple of methods in, if you do Alt and \, then it pops up this. Now this is really handy for quickly jumping between methods and properties and things within your current file. So imagine you've got a really big file with lots of methods. You can Alt \, and then very quickly jump around to the different things. This is very similar. If you press Control, Shift, and F, then you get a structure window. So if you prefer this always being as a pane, that's a very similar thing. I can jump through and see what's in my current file. Another way you can jump through things in your current file is Alt. So you can press Alt and up and down, and then that jumps between these things. So that's Alt and up and down, or Option and up and down, if you're on the Mac. Whilst we're looking at jumping up and down with the keyboard, one useful shortcut is Alt-, and that basically jumps to the last active location you were in your code. And this works across files. So if you've quickly gone off somewhere else, say I'm here and then I go to program, I'm looking at something, then I want to go back, I can press Control and minus and it jumps me straight back. So there's a navigation history there almost. And you can do Control, Shift and minus to go the other way. Another one which is quite common in code editors is Control G for go to line. So I can quickly jump between different lines. You can also choose a column number, and down here we can see what the current line and column number is. Another bit of functionality which I love, which is so useful, which I've never seen other people use before when pair programming, is incoming calls. And as an example for this, if I click on my private method, and again I'm going to do Alt and backtick just to show this discoverable menu, just to show you. And to discover this, I'm going to show you another shortcut. You've got Alt and backtick to show navigate to. You've got Control, Alt, Shift and A for inspect this. And again, as I mentioned at the start, if you're not a keyboard shortcut fan, you can click on these icons in the gutter and you get like the context aware options. So we can see navigate to, which we've seen. We can see inspect this. We can see refactor this, which we'll be looking at in an upcoming video. So you can see by clicking somewhere, a lot of these other menus are very discoverable, and then you can learn these shortcuts. and learn the functionality too. But what I'm interested in is the inspect this. And actually we've got incoming and outgoing calls there, which is what I want to show you. But you can also go to inspect this and see it here as well. The incoming calls. If I click this, then this gives you a kind of almost like reverse call stack. So if I just expand these out, I can see all the different call stacks of what calls into my method. So this is very powerful for discoverability. Obviously, this is a very simple project, but imagine a really big project and you're getting a bit confused about what calls what throughout the big code base. This reverse call stack tree view is so useful. Whilst we're talking about navigation, the last thing I want to show is just finding and replacing in files. So if I do Control-Shift-F, you're probably very used to this from other editors and IDEs or even like Notepad. But it's pretty standard. You've got the match case, match words, you can do regex searches, you can change scope, solution project directory, you can filter by different extensions. You've got a preview, so as I can click through, you can preview them. You can click open in find window, and you can see here it says control and enter. So I'll do that. So that opens in the find window. And as I click through these, we've got the preview, and you can live edit in the preview, or you can double click to go in your main window. If I want to go back to the pop-up, I can do this cog for settings, and I can tweak my search criteria. I can also, if I close the structure window there, I can right click on any folder and say edit and then finding files. There's also replacing files. If I do finding files, it does it in that folder. Replacing files was Control-Shift-H, and pretty standard, it's got a find and replace. Again, you can do it across the solution, the directory. So I won't go too much into this because it's fairly standard. One nice thing though is, if we see here, see how it says preserve case? Quite often if I copy and paste a class, a file, and then I want to find and replace all instances of a particular word, say I want to replace order for product or something like that. Throughout that file, some of the instances of that word product might have a capital P at the start, and some might have a lowercase. By doing this, you don't have to do two case-sensitive find and replaces. This can handle just keeping that original case, which is really useful. Last thing, quickly show, while we're looking at navigation, if you've got a file that's got lots of things in, so I don't really have a file with lots of things in, but let's use this as an example. If you want to collapse a few things just to make it a bit easier to work with, if you hover the mouse over the gutter, you can see this downward arrow. So I can collapse things like that method, or this method, or your entire class. If you were using regions, please don't, then you can collapse those as well. And sometimes that's quite nice just to simplify what you're working with. I find it very useful if I'm working with like a JSON file or something, and I'm viewing JSON in here, and I can just collapse big collections or that kind of thing. So that's probably enough navigation tips for now. As I said at the start, I would recommend just taking a few and just practicing a few at a time so it slowly sinks into your muscle memory.